I'm Nicola Brown. I'm co-chair of Wish Northwest. And today we have with us Hayley White.
Hi.
Hayley is a mum to Freddie, you may have just seen briefly. Hayley is a PT, a personal trainer, an ultra adventure runner. She's quite amazing, really. We ran this event as a Wish Northwest region last year, November last year, actually, and it was a great session, certainly in terms of personal development. Now, a lot's changed since then. Personal development in terms of resilience, I'm sure we're all either struggling with or gaining momentum with over this time. So Hayley's going to touch on that, but she's going to talk about resilience full stop. It's applicability to our roles in housing, but also individually in all our lives, at home probably with our kids running around and trying to work at the same time. So without further ado, I will hand over to Hayley. I'll manage the chat, so if there's any questions come up, do stick them on the chat, and we will either pause for a break, maybe for Hayley to have a drink, or at the end we'll answer them. Over to you, Hayley.
Thank you, Nicola. Good morning, ladies. Thank you so much for joining this webinar today, and thank you very much for your patience. This is my very first webinar, and it is about resilience, as Nicola said. I'd like to take this opportunity of thanking Nicola again for inviting me back to Wish. It may be some of you have seen me or even met me before at my last presentation back in September in Manchester for Wish. It was a pleasure meeting you, and although I can't see you obviously face to face, it'll be lovely sharing this with you. I understand obviously that you all work in different sectors of the UK housing sector. So resilience. Oh, make sure I can go to the next slide. There we go. Right, so Wish is a fun networking community offering encouragement and support for every woman just like you. Wish believe, as do I, that there is power in an individual, but far greater strength in the collective, i.e. working together. Housing, I can only imagine, is a tough sector with many curveballs and barriers constantly. Maybe the need for customers is ever increasing, whilst your resources are limited, and housing associations have multiple leaders possibly pitching for different solutions. As a woman, and in my working environment, I find it still very male dominant, and men just generally sometimes shout a little louder or carry on regardless when faced with a barrier to what they want to achieve, whereas women are perhaps more inclined to accept hierarchy and accept the barriers rather than work through or around them. However, right now, and certainly as we hopefully sooner rather than later, we start to return to work and our roles, who knows, things may have changed. I believe so many things will need to change actually post-COVID-19. And I think your environment, your industry and what you do will definitely change. Now, whilst my presentation is about resilience and the resilient me, since I did this particular presentation in September, we are now going through a period in our life, in history, that is definitely testing our resilience like never before. Unprecedented times that I believe and sincerely hope you are learning in any way you can from this, so that it will add some more strings to your bow, and therefore you're actually far more resilient than you believe. So, how do you become more resilient? How do you develop your resilience skills in your roles within housing? Wish is focused on helping women to progress in the housing sector by being the best versions of themselves that you can be. Strong teamwork, interpersonal and organisational skills, personal and work goals, no matter what. Sensitivity, empathy, to be passionate, determined, tenacious, an interest in working with diverse social groups. Excellent communication skills, verbal and written, leadership skills with determination and confidence, and finally the ability to adapt to different situations and to be able to quickly think outside the box, and never more has that probably been appropriate than today. So, who am I? Well, as Nicola gave a little bit of a pre-presentation. I don't work in the housing sector, but of the adventure ultra races I have competed in, and in my day-to-day job as a medical exercise specialist and a personal trainer, I have had each of those skills, and I need to continue to work on them to enable continued success and growth, both professionally and personally. So first thing is never become complacent. I've been self-employed since 2003, was at LA Fitness, and then we got taken over by Pure Gym, and I've been there ever since, and hopefully due to return very soon. Last time I did this presentation, at this slide, I said that a characteristic of resilience is the understanding that life is full of challenges. While we cannot avoid many of these problems, we can remain open, flexible, and willing to adapt to change. Well, I think it's quite fair to say that never a truer word could be said than in the situation we're in right now. Resilient people develop a mental capacity that allows them to adapt with ease during adversity, a bit like bending of bamboo instead of it breaking. Resilient people understand that life is full of challenges. Whilst we cannot avoid many problems we face day to day, and particularly now, we can and should remain open, flexible, and willing to adapt to it. And we've had to adapt to a phenomenal change imposed upon us. We shall at the end of this webinar discuss the 7 skills to building resilience and building resilience at work. But firstly, the resilient me. So I was, as you might have seen on the previous slide, it did say asthmatic, and I was diagnosed at the age of 3, and I was a very sickly child. I struggled with sport. I certainly wasn't a sporty child at all. I missed a lot of school, but at 18 years old, with further deteriorating health, I decided to sign up to a local gym, and that was Dave's Gym in Northwich. I spent 4 years taking part in step aerobics, body attack, and a little bit of weightlifting, and my asthma had improved somewhat, and being a little overconfident, I decided to go for a run. I'd never ever been able to run before. Well, it went spectacularly wrong. Barely 300 meters down the road, but this time I was absolutely on my knees. I thought I'd gained some fitness through the gym, through the step aerobics, the weight training, but no. Unfortunately, I ended up very much like I had in my school years, on my knees, gasping for breath. So, undetermined to actually give up, I decided to persevere, and to try and give me some goal. I do very well with having little goals or challenges. I decided to enter my first ever running race, and that was a race for life. I'm sure some of you, many of you, might have actually done a race for life local to where you live. And I signed up to one. I was 23 years old at this point, and it was a huge step for me. And in January 1999, I crossed that finishing line at my very first race for life. It was the most exhilarating experience I'd had to date. And having experienced it, I actually wanted more. It kind of got that wheel going. I needed to set myself, therefore, an even bigger goal to keep me going. So why not a marathon? So in April 1999, I completed my first London marathon, and it was about 4.5 hours, and it went on from there. My last London marathon was in 2006, and between that 1999 and 2006, I then finished in 3 hours 18. I had also done many other marathons as well in that time, and I'd had a little few experiments with some basic triathlons as well, local to me. Between that period of 1999 and 2006, I saw many changes in my personal life. I had married, but in a rather messy, violent relationship, then divorced. I'd worked as a PA in Guernsey to then have to return back to the UK and build my life back up again. I qualified as a personal trainer, never having done anything in sport or sport management and recreational. But I decided that as I loved it so much, I didn't particularly want to carry on down the personal assistant route. So I thought, how can I make a career out of doing something that I've discovered that I love, is actually very good mentally and physically for me, and helps me with stressful times. And so I went back to university and I started studying for my personal training courses. It was a dreadful, stressful time of my life. It was a very, it was a period that I wouldn't want to repeat, but obviously it's had its means and it's meant well. When things got on top of me, I'd just head to the gym. I'd also head outside and go for a run till my mind was at peace. Yet my body thanked me for it as well, because I was keeping myself fit, and by keeping myself fit, I was also eating well with nutrition. Feeding myself well was also good for my mental health, and it meant I remained fit and well physically and mentally. My business was growing substantially as well, and I met a gentleman called Andy, and we have just celebrated our 10th wedding anniversary. So there's a picture there of myself and my son. So Andy and I had Freddie in 2009. Just prior to this, I did my first ever UK Ironman triathlon, and that's basically a 2.4 mile swim followed by 112 miles on the bike, and then a marathon, which is 26.2 miles, and they're all back to back, and you have a certain time to do each discipline and overall. And unbeknown to me, I was actually 6 weeks pregnant when I did my Ironman. So after the Ironman, feeling very, very tired and exhausted and not quite understanding why, and it was taking me so long to recover, Andy and I discovered that I was pregnant. So I had Freddie in beginning of June, but in May 2009, I certainly didn't stop my training. I could understand the mental benefits of the exercise and eating well. So I would have been foolish really to have stopped that. So I did carry on training. I did carry on running as well. Perfectly safe to do so. I wouldn't recommend it for anybody that has never ran before, but I was very fit and I carried on. And it was a joy really. It was really good. And at 38 weeks pregnant, I actually did the Manchester 10K, and that definitely sticks in my mind. I was in the hope then that I would actually go into labour. I kind of had enough then. You know how you're very heavy, for those of you who've had children, very heavy, very uncomfortable, no sleep. So I was hoping, but it didn't actually work. So that was that. From after having Freddie on the beginning of June, 1st of June, we then did various other little races. You can see down the slide, March 2010, I began my training and I did my first race then again, which was the Liverpool half marathon. My first ultra distance though was in September 2010. It was called the Bullock Smithy, and it's actually near Hazel Grove in Stockport. It's a total of 56 miles, and both my husband Andy and I did it, and it was a walk. It is traditionally a walk. However, fast forwarding, and it's one race, the only race that I'll do each year, has such lovely memories for me. It's a beautiful course, goes all around the Peak District. Now as a runner, I actually did it last time was in 2018, and I finished third female. So when I first did the Bullock Smithy, it took me, you have 24 hours to do it in, and it took me about 23 hours. But I did it in about 11 hours 14, and I came third female. So all that training and persistence and going, I could see obviously greater increase in my fitness. My first ever official adventure race, ultra race, was the Marathon des Sables. It's actually quite a well-known race, some of you may have heard of it, and it takes place every April in the Sahara. Sadly, this year's was cancelled. And I did that in 2016, and I came 11th GB female finisher. That definitely was the start for me, the love of adventure racing, seeing different parts of the world that you would never normally ordinarily see, and also big ultra distances, and being self-sufficient as well. There was no hands-on help, no checkpoints or anything like that. You literally, what you needed for survival and for your needs, you carried on your back. And that for me was, I just loved it. It brought back all the amazing thoughts, the preparation itself I love. And that for me was, the Sahara was the first. So we went on to look for other big ultra races around the world, and they are expensive. So it's a case of a couple of years to save up, and then you go for it. So I did one in 2017 called Deadwater, brand new race, and that's in the UK. And if there's one thing I have ran pretty much the length and breadth of the UK, it is beautiful. Scotland, Wales, Ireland, we live in a beautiful country, and some of the most spectacular races, beautiful, memorable races that I've done are in this country. So that was a race from Scotland to Wales, precisely Kielder Forest, just inside of Scotland, to Wales, which is just outside Chester Races, actually, near the Abode Hotel, and that's kind of classed into Wales. And again, we were doing well. I was second female, and I've done various other ultra races from then, anything from between 37 miles to 60 miles in that period. And then more recently, we did Escape from Meriden on the 11th of November in 2019, second female again. And that was whereby you had to run as far as you could in 24 hours. And I accumulated 93 miles. So we've actually got another race since isolation, but I'll discuss if we have time with that one later on. But I needed an A race. I'd loved the Sahara so much. So what was going to be my A race? Well, my A race was going to be, as I'd seen on the internet, the Arctic. It was probably the most extreme in the environments. If you think the Sahara is extreme, there was a lot of medics and people on hand there, and also by being in the desert, yes, it was exceptionally hot. It was sometimes 50, 54 degrees in the day when you're running, but I never felt that my life was under threat. And in comparison to my A race, the Arctic, it did at times actually feel like a little bit of a summer running holiday. But the Arctic is something different. That environment literally can rob you of life if you get it wrong within 20 minutes, simple as that. So I wanted a race that would define me. I felt at times that with my profession and more people being personal trainers, and I was saying before about sometimes we need to shout a bit louder and that, between qualifying as a personal trainer and to now, there's a lot more trainers out there. A lot more, and I just felt I needed something to kind of put me back on that pedestal, to prove I knew my worth, I knew my stuff as a profession. I was also a good athlete as well, and it was the Arctic. So I applied, I was accepted, having proven what I was capable of doing, and that wasn't only physical fitness, but you had to have a mental stability, I guess is the appropriate one. They had to make sure, because you were on your own. There's very few people that do this race each year. It averages about 20 athletes from around the world. I think there was 18 last March when I did it. And it is deemed as the toughest foot race on the earth, basically. And I decided to race across the Arctic, and it is known as the 6633. It was going to take me well and truly out of my comfort zone, and that was half the attraction. It is. I think when you take yourself out of, I mean, okay, this was really taking me out of my comfort zone, but when you take yourself out of the comfort zone, it is scary. I believe that unless you challenge and give yourself a little bit of scare, something isn't always attained and learned from it. So temperatures can average about -25, but certainly the race that happened this year, in March, it actually dropped down as low as -60. And on the record of this race, in the 12 years it's been going on, it has dropped down as much as -70. There were no finishes that year. You have to be self-sufficient at all times as well. So you pull a pulk. It's like a sled on wheels. And people ask, why on wheels? Well, we were going to be on the Dempster Highway, which is a road, so you can have your pulk on wheels. If you were in the Antarctic, which, fingers crossed, we will do that one day, then it would just be a sled, because there's no roads in the Antarctic, because obviously there's no human beings as such. Okay, so I accepted for the race, as I said, and I had to start my specific training in February 2018. I was in the race in March 2019. My specific training and nutrition began, and kit was certainly, there was a lot of kit required, and I had to learn how to use it quickly, and in many different scenarios and cases. Nothing ever goes to plan in the Arctic. You are thrown with every scenario, every what if and if be and but there possibly can be, and you have to be absolutely on the ball to deal with that. especially as the race goes on and you become more sleep deprived. So lots and lots of practice with kit from about November 18. Kit is it's the essential. I think it makes or breaks you. Yes, you've got to be incredibly fit physically and mentally, but I think kit is something you can clearly oversee, and it does mean, I think, the difference between finishing or not. And in a worst case scenario, you know, if you end up with hypothermia or frostbite, you know, it could end up resulting in death. So you need to make sure that your sleeping bag, your survival kit is absolutely the best of, and that you've taken diligence in looking at your nutrition. Practice is therefore essential to know how each piece of kit works, when it is appropriate to use, and to maximise that piece of kit. And some pieces of kit you suddenly realise can actually be used for multiple purposes as well. And I was very, very diligent in practicing with my kit. And the one thing I did do was, the first thing I bought was my all my different pairs of gloves. So I would have base layers. You never expose skin. Never. The only other bit of skin, as you saw from the very first slide, was probably just like my eyes, because you don't necessarily feel the cold and the wind chill on you. So I had all my gloves, and I had 6 pairs of gloves in total, base layers, then another pair of mitts, and it would go from gloves to mitts and different mitts, and then you had really big over mitts. And before I could afford to purchase them all, I got the biggest, cheapest pair of like oven gloves, and I would practice doing everything and anything with those. So what's everything and anything? Well, zips. So I realised that there's no way if I needed to put on a full 6 pair of gloves that I was going to be able to get hold of my zip. So I had to start attaching long bits of loops of ribbon to all my zips so I could do them. And then I had the clever idea, at least I think it was clever, to start adding to the zips lots of different colours. So my base layers were like an orange ribbon, and then my intermediate levels that act as a bit of a water barrier, so just in case I got sweating, I'll tell you why that's important in a bit. And they were all purple ribbons, and then my outer layers and kind of shell windproofers were black ribbon, and it went on like that really. So you learn things as you went along. And things like going to the toilet, you know, when you've got all your gear on and all your gloves, then you need to unzip your pants and get them down, and wipe your bum. You can't do it with 6 pairs of gloves on. So we had to practice wiping our bum with big oven mitts on as well. I slept a lot outside, and as we drew towards the winter months of 2018 and into the early months of 2019, before leaving for Canada, I did a lot of sleeping outside in a bivvy. Bivvy's like a very, very small tent. You literally just only about fit in it. So if you're claustrophobic, you might struggle. And then what I would do with the last month before I flew out to Canada, I actually blindfolded myself. And I had all my kit in specific places and into specific bags in my pulk. And I blindfolded myself, and then I would challenge myself to go, right, I need to find my goggles. And I would then know that my goggles were part of my head. That was in an orange bag. It would make no difference me being blindfolded, but the orange bag I knew was at the top of my pulk. So if you imagine my body lying into my sled, I imagine that's where my big pieces of kit would go. So anything head and neck, orange bag at the top. Anything neck to my waist was in a blue bag, middle of my pulk. And it went on like that. Survival items right at the very top and to the left. Why? Because even if sleep deprived, hallucinating, not hearing, seeing things properly, your heart is obviously top left. And that's your survival. So I thought, if I just remember my heart, my survival, I'll put that top left in my pulk. Not everybody does it like that. I worked out how and what would suit me best. So whilst you know, people come up with ideas, maybe in your working environment, that's really good. If it doesn't work for you, that's okay. You just maybe adapt it or find your own way. Nobody's to say that anybody's right or wrong. The other athletes that I met out into the Arctic had far different systems, but it worked for them, and that's a good thing. So don't be afraid of not doing what everybody else does if it works. So picture here, two contrasts. So the first one on the left is me dragging a rather large tyre, and tyre dragging was a very essential part of the training. Although the organisers said it wasn't crucial, because I'm only 5'2" and I'm about 47 kilograms wet through, my pulk was going to be about 35-40 kilograms with all the kit and all my food, etc., loaded up. Now on wheels, you don't actually notice it. But by day 8 and 200 miles in, there's a good chance you could probably feel it. And I was concerned maybe of how it would feel on my back. So I did a lot of training. And anybody, I mean, I appreciate you're from all over the country, but anybody that saw me dragging my tyre, I made a little name for myself in Northwich. It's like, have you seen the woman dragging a tyre? And somebody very kindly posted it on Facebook on like our Northwich Live. And at first I was a bit, because it did attract a lot of attention, but I turned it into a good thing. And I was always going to do this race for a charity, for Mind. I'll come back to my choice on that charity later. So whilst people were commenting and posting, going, oh, that lady's out again dragging a tyre, it was an opportunity for me to share my Just Giving page for Mind. And even before I was anywhere near set off for Canada, I could start to see some money being donated and into that, and it was good. And yeah, the kids loved it as well. It was really good press. Kids would go, what are you doing, lady? And I'd stop and I'd talk to them and I'd tell them, and they'd be like, oh, that's amazing. And I'd be like, well, you know what, you could do something like this. Not saying to drag a tyre, but just think about the adventures that can have. And it really was lovely. And on the days and nights, I did a lot of dragging at night because I knew that I would be walking in the Arctic on my own, in the middle of nowhere, pitch black, dragging my pug. So I did a lot of dragging in the night. And I had a couple of police officers that I got to know very well, who at first stopped and was like, what are you doing, love? And I'd explain, and they'd laugh, and they'd do. And then I would see them on their shift, and they'd go, toot, toot, you know, and they'd give me a little toot, and I'd give them a little wave. And I've actually seen them a couple of times when I've been out running now, and they still know, and it was good. And the picture on the right is actually me, that was then out in France. Now, we as a family love going skiing. We like our winter holidays, but in February of 2019, far too risky for me to ski. Just be my luck, wouldn't it, to break something. So while the boys enjoyed skiing, I used the time to go hiking on my own in the mountains, basically. Told obviously all the mountain rescue people, and I made sure I kept very sensible. But I did a lot of sleeping outside as well. Fortunately, it wasn't as cold as I hoped it would be, but it still served as a purpose. And a very quick, funny little story. So I'm out on the side, not far from actually the hotel, in my bivvy sleeping. I think he'd had a couple of drinks, and he kind of like almost knocked onto my bivvy, and I was like, unzipped. Hi, and he was French, and he tried to talk to me in French. And I was like, I'm sorry, I don't understand English. Oh, what are you doing? And so I explained, and he went, okay, and he just walked off. And I said, well, listen, if you think I'm doing anything wrong, but the mountain rescue do know I'm here and I'm perfectly safe, and my husband and son are in that room in that hotel, is absolutely fine. He said, okay, and he just went. He left me alone. So I've met some very wonderful people as well. So in the run up to the race, I bounced from feelings of confidence, of yes, I've done so much training, I've lived and breathed this race, this training, but you know, the stats don't favour very well in this race. So on average, 75% of athletes fail, and sometimes they'll fail for a second time as well. It is pretty much though a once in a lifetime thing, because of the expense and the time taken out that you go. Although the race is only 9 days, you've got 9 days to cover the 383 miles. By the time you're getting there, you need time to get there, be there, climatise, do the race, and then give a little bit of time for eventuality, just in case the weather comes in and you can't get back. You're gone for about a month, so it's a big, big ask as well. So the stats are high. Only 75%, only 2 to 3 people out of 10 will make it. And like I said, in 2019, March last year, there was 18 of us. There was only 7 this year, and only 2 people finished. The year I did it, in 2019, 18 of us started and only 6 of us finished. and I was actually the only female, and I'm actually the only GB female to have completed the 383 miles as it stands at the moment, but obviously that could change in time. And this year was the 12th year that it ran as well. There's been a couple of years and there's been no finishes whatsoever. Women are far and few between as well, which is quite sad. But on the 3rd of March, I left Crew Station, and that was a picture of Andy, Freddie and I on the train station. And I made no big do of it. There was no tears, there was no drama like, oh, bye and all that. No. As soon as I woke up that morning, it was race face. And my boys know, they've seen me many a time prep for races, and that's it. We were in the zone. So at the station, it was like, you know, you've got, I'll have my emergency tracker on, you'll be able to spot me, any problems, you'll know about it, you know, look after each other, I'm going to be fine, you take care, on that train, go. And that was good, because Freddie and Andy are just like, right, okay, mum's fine. The fact that by the time we're coming out of Crew Station, I'm like, oh, in tears, but I didn't want them to see that. That's not a sign of weakness or anything. I just didn't want them to see my emotion, to know just how much the roller coaster mentally I was going through. This was a huge deal. This was going to, for as far as I was concerned, prove me professionally, prove me my worth. Can I really do this? Am I really, you know, am I an ultra adventure runner? Do I have that mental fitness, that physical capacity as well? It was a huge deal, not to mention obviously the money and time invested into it as well. So my emotions were going up and down. Very little sleep was had. This picture here is basically foods. So we have to eat a lot of calories in the Arctic because of the extreme conditions. And it was, I had to do a lot of practice with eating. Fortunately, with lots of training, it didn't mean that my weight fluctuated too much. And I wanted to put a little bit of, shall we say, weight on before I went anyway, because I knew with the extreme temperatures cold, I would feel it. So this is typically of what we would eat. Bearing in mind you're trying to work against weight. So nuts are very high in calories and good forms of fat, but they also weigh a ton as well. So keeping it high fat, high calories, but light, we had things like salami. We had a lot of salt is good as well, because obviously you do sweat, and I more favour salty foods than I do sweet stuff. So things like chai bars, the pretzels had salt on there, and you want your treats as well, because you know it's going to get tough. And sometimes, you know, and food is something that we do to treat ourselves, to please, to have pleasure and so forth. So my little luxury and pleasure is, when I do occasionally have sweet stuff, is licorice or all sorts, and chocolate peanut M&Ms. So there was a couple there, and I needed about 8,000 calories a day, or should I say every 24 hours. And the scary thing is, to make up 8,000 calories a day doesn't actually take a lot if you choose wisely. So believe it or not, the pot of oats that I would make up with my hot coffee in a flask, the salami, the Smarties, the obviously packs of sweets, the pretzel, the chai bar, couple of packs of super noodles, really more for the just the fibre and the salt. There's another pasta thing behind back there, and a reason that's almost 8,000 calories. Yeah, it's pretty scary, isn't it? Obviously the salami adding a lot, and there was a couple of packets of those as well. So yes, there was a lot there. Right, so when we arrived at Whitehorse, I flew from Heathrow all the way through to Vancouver to Whitehorse. The very next day, you get to meet in person your athletes, and they're from all over the world. We had a couple from Australia, we had some from Zimbabwe, we had a gentleman from Japan, there was myself from England, and then there was a gentleman from Wales, Mark, we had a couple from Ireland, a couple from Canada. And one from Romania, and a few others. I think that should be well. And bearing in mind, there's others as well that are doing another race. There's two races. There's a 120 miler, which stops at checkpoint 3, and then there's the full race, which is 383. And that I'm not in that 18. I'm not including in those as well. So in total, there's 18 athletes, and about 5 of them were doing the 120, and it's a good start point. But from my point of view, for cost and time out, I thought if I'm going to go over there, I might as well go for the full race really, rather than do the 120. So on that day, we are checking our systems, we're looking at our pulse, and the organisers want to make sure that we can use our our stows, that we can get in and out of our bivvy systems within seconds, so that if the weather suddenly comes in, we can get into our bivvy system and they know we're going to be safe. Because like I say, there's nobody running along beside you, there's no vehicles or anything, you're out on your own, and whilst they may only be 20-30 minutes away, if you get things wrong, you know, something awful can happen easily within a couple of minutes, let alone 20 minutes of them getting to you. So I've clicked onto this slide, okay, so this is a rather large big Danish swirl, and it's rather appropriate really, because it's known as the cinnamon bun. And when we leave Whitehorse, we head on up to a place called Eagles Plain. That's where the race starts. It takes a full day to get there. And after we've done all our bivvy checks and we've had our last medicals and everything, we make our way. We make this one stop, and it's called Braeburns Lodge. And this is a tradition for any athlete that you have to purchase one of these cinnamon buns. Now, it probably doesn't do it justice because of the way it is on the slide, but it's literally bigger than my head. And that alone is 5,000 calories. So not to worry about calories, obviously, when you're about to start this race. And the tradition is just that you're able to eat it all. And those that successfully eat it all usually finish the race. Well, not being a big fan of sweet stuff anyway, but oh God, it's stodgy. And I managed about half of it, and I think I gave a little bit of it to Bron from Australia, and she was like, that's heavy going, Hayley. But the rest of it I kept, and I put it in a bag, and I put it in my bulk, and I thought, I'm going to eat that on my first day when I'm in the race. But that's a tradition to it, and a lovely couple that live out there in Braeburns Lodge. We arrive at Eagles Plain and we stay for one night, and this kind of slide gives you just an impression, the vastness, the beauty of the Northern Territories of Canada. I don't know if any of you have ever been to Canada, certainly maybe to Alaska, but this is the Northern Territories, and yes, it is incredibly harsh, beautiful in the summer, but beautiful, spectacular, and you know, breathtaking in the winter as well. And Eagles Plain, so the Dempster Highway, some of you may have heard of the ice truckers, gentlemen and women that take this very, very scary, you know, risky journey from Whitehorse all the way to the Arctic Circle, to deliver goods and also return gases and other minerals, the resource there. And they go along the Dempster Highway, and it has its risks to it. So this is where we're going to race. We're going to go along the Dempster Highway, and there's only one place to stop between something like 500 miles, and that's called Eagles Plain. And it's this motel that inside looks like it's not been properly decorated probably for about 40 years. It was originally built actually for gentlemen that were putting in a gas oil pipeline, but it never happened, and it still hasn't happened. But the truckers use it, and it's their first place. And we also use it to stop there after the race when we're trying to make our whole journey back from the Arctic Ocean all the way back to Whitehorse. And inside there's all these huge big heads, and that is a moose. Now everybody said, what about polar bears? Well, fortunately, because of the time of year that this race is on, polar bears are very rare. And you only, if you are going to see them, you'll only see them at the very end of the race, in where the race finishes in Tuk. And it's too cold at that time of the year, so they're still in hibernation. We weren't scared of the polar bears. Everybody asked about the polar bears. What we were more worried about was the mooses, because they are huge. I mean, I don't know if the picture gives it any representation, but it's just so big. I mean, the antlers alone are longer than my body. So, and they're very temperamental. They're like cows, but more angry and more silly. And if you were to see one of those, you would be, I would have worried. So my biggest fear were the mooses. When we arrived at Eagles Plain, there was a lady there called Eleanor, and she was everything at Eagles Plain. She served you your meal, she made your bed, she sorted out the plumbing. I got there and my my toilet was blocked, and as I flushed it, everything started coming up through the bath. It wasn't the best, so I got moved into a room. And there was also a pump station, a fueling station next to it for the truckers. She served you there. She did absolutely everything. She ran this place. And so on the morning of the race, on the 7th of March, Martin, Martin Light, the race director, said, right, okay, so we've got the mayoress from Eagles Plain that's going to come and open this race. And out pops Eleanor, puts on a coat, and she's wobbling along, and she's got a gun over her shoulder, and the way that they started the race was just firing. She just fired this huge big pistol that she probably actually went and hunted down the moose, and that made me laugh. Eleanor, she was everything. On the morning of the race, this is a picture here literally at the start line. We are go, and there's no order in which we can get to. If you look at the picture, there's a lady facing towards us with a camera. That's Veronica. If you just look along to her left, well, actually, no, it's to her right, but it's left on the picture. There's somebody there with a purple top and what looks like a peachy bubble hat on, and then a black band. That's me. That is me, and I'm about the middle of the pack, and we're all mixed up there. So some of us are doing the 120-mile race, and some of us are doing the 383. And there's a few people there that tried it a few years ago, didn't succeed, and they're going for another go. The weather, the temperature was rather crazy, really, for the Arctic. So I said about sweating. So we come to this point. One of the most important things to not do in the Arctic or anywhere where it's extreme cold is to sweat. If you sweat, which is very easy to do when you're exercising really long, you've got those layers on, that sweat will eventually, as you cool down or you stop for a moment to refeed, will go cold. It will make you go cold. It acts as a thermal. So if you get sweaty and that comes through your layers, you've then got an open channel for the outside elements to then come through to you, and literally your body temperature drops like a stone. So you are not allowed to get sweaty, not ever. And it's the biggest one reason, that and the sheer tiredness, exhaustion and hallucinations that usually pull you from the race, and you'll either pull yourself out or the organisers will see you curled up on the side and you're bundled into the back of one of the vehicles. So no sweating under any circumstances. And this particular day, at that moment, they were having unusually high temperatures. I say high temperatures, it was about -9. That's warm for the Arctic. So it posed a problem. We were all geared up for it to be really, really cold, and it wasn't. So there was a lots of on-off with layering. Bit of a faff, but those of us got it right. We finished, and believe it or not, after that very first 24 hours a day, there were 6 people that had to get pulled out to the race because they sweated and then it froze. And the way you see it is you open your jacket, and you know when you see in the back of a freezer, you get all that white ice in, and just all foams inside the jacket. So this slide shows you how the race is split up. We start at Eagles Plain, which is checkpoint 1, and you've got your first 23 miles, and that gets you to the board that says you are now within the Arctic Circle, and that is called the 6633. It's the northern southern hemisphere coordinates, and that's why the race is called that. From checkpoint 1 to checkpoint 2 is James's Creek, and that's 47 miles. Checkpoint 2 to checkpoint 3, that is actually the finish point of the 120 race at checkpoint 3, and that's at Fort McPherson, and that's a 43-mile stint. From checkpoint 3 to checkpoint 4, it's 47 miles, and that gets you to midpoint Peel River. Checkpoint 4 to 5 is 52 miles, and that gets you into the next major town village from actually Fort McPherson, called Aklavik. And then checkpoint 5 to 6 is 73 miles, the longest stint, and that gets you into the next biggest town, is Untitled. And then 6 to 7 is 42 miles, that's known as just the gateway. It's just nothing but a road and vast mountains around you. And then the finishing part from checkpoint 7, the gateway, to checkpoint 8, the Arctic Circle, the village of Tuktoytuk, is 55 miles, and that makes up 383, but it's a little bit over 383 miles. And there's no stopping. And out of those 8 checkpoints, obviously your first one is Eagles Plain to checkpoint 8. There's only 3 of those checkpoints that are actually a solid shelter. Things like James's Creek, midpoint Peel River, and the Gateway is just you and your bivvy out in the open, or there's like a trailer. But that trailer is not heated. It's as cold in the trailer as it is outside. It just might just fend you off from the winter, the chill, the cold, the wind. So we got to the Arctic Circle. You see there, latitude 66 and 33 degrees north, and that was 23 miles in. Nobody stops there, nobody at all. What you do is you get to that point, you fill up your flasks again. We've got 4 big, huge flasks, hot water, you can put your soup and your salts and things in there. And I've got in my hand there a picture of some stones. Now, I said to you why I chose the charity Mind. So Mind, I'm sure many of you know, is a charity regarding mental health awareness. And the reason why I chose Mind was because as a personal trainer and medical exercise specialist, I work with many people who have got medical injuries and need some form of rehabilitation. And some people's medical issues have been long term, and that does have an effect on their mental health. And there are a lot of people who just see me anyway with mental health problems. And this became a very apparent over my, I've been doing what I do for about 17 years. And certainly in the last 7 to 8 years, mental health has really, I've seen a vast increase in it, as we're all talking about it more, which is great, but there's a lot of mental health. And right now, I'm more worried about the mental health of people than the COVID itself. It's something we really need to seriously consider. I chose Mind because in the year before I went to the Arctic, I very tragically had 3 people that I knew, 2 people that I trained, and 1 person, a friend, that committed suicide. And certainly 2 of them I could have, it didn't come maybe as a surprise, but for 1 of them, it was a shock. You know, he was everything that you wouldn't expect. And so I learned an awful lot about mental health. And doing this race, I decided, because everybody was saying, oh, you're doing it for charity, and I decided to do it for Mind. And those stones are 1 stone from each family, the children of those persons that took their life. And I made a promise to those children, they were all men, those 3 men that took their lives, that I would take those stones and I would put them on the Arctic Circle. And with everything going on and the whole getting to the Arctic Circle, to that first checkpoint, it was like a tick mentally, and I'd calm down. And it took me 23 miles just to calm down and say, right, everything I've been practicing and doing is coming together. This is the moment, yes, but trust in your systems. You've practiced those systems, you've blindfolded yourself, you've been doing for this month. Everything's going to be okay. It's just a bit of luck you need. When we got there, I would send off a little bit more. And as I got probably about an hour after leaving that checkpoint, I stopped and I realised I hadn't actually dropped off those stones. At this point, I was walking with a gentleman called Mark. We'd never met each other before, but so far we'd done a lot of chatting and we seemed to be on a similar pace. He's also a coach, a triathlon coach, and we never knew that we would be doing the race together. Generally trained to be on your own. However, as I continued along this race, we spent more time together. We ended up being together right to the end of the race. I turned around to Mark and I said, I've forgotten to drop those stones. And I'd told him about the story of it. And he said, well, you know what you've got to do? You've got to make sure that you get all the way to the end, and you make sure that you finish this race to drop off those stones. And it was the first little, lip quiver. I was very high on emotion. And it was I decided, come what may, I was going to finish that race because I'd made a promise to drop those stones, and we did. This next slide is now from checkpoint 2 to checkpoint 3. That's me on the far left, Mark in the middle, and a gentleman called Neil Kapoor on the right. And this was his 3rd attempt at this race. And bless him, he didn't make it this time either. That was our first night, and you can see there the Northern Lights. They don't look quite like that as they do on that slide, believe it or not. They're more whispers, some of you might have seen. And it wasn't until Veronica stopped us, took the picture on a slow exposure, of which we're getting very cold at this point. And I'm thinking, for goodness sake, let us carry on going. But when she turned around the camera and showed us that, I was like, wow. And that was my moment when I had to go, you know what? This is a race. It means so much to me. But for goodness sake, Hayley, you're in the Arctic. How many people can ever have that experience? Just stop, appreciate what's around you, and think where you are right now. So at that moment, it made me realise also how lucky and what other things I could take from this. And it wasn't just all about, you know, it wasn't all about what it was going to do for me, but also how I could share this then with other people as well. To checkpoint 3, which is at Fort McPherson, and you can see some gentlemen in the background there. They're some of those that had successfully finished the 120, but 4 of them there, unfortunately, they had been pulled out of the race. Exhaustion, injuries, and unfortunately sweating as well. But that's Mark. Mark is full glory. He's only about 5'5", 5'6", but absolutely like an ox. And you know what? We realised by 120 miles in and by checkpoint 3 that we were probably going to do this whole race then together. And I think for my mum and dad and my husband, and certainly for my son Freddie, they could see on the trackers, anybody following us, they could see that we were next to each other. And I think for them, it was a real sigh of relief that I wasn't mumbling around in the middle of the Arctic all on my own. My mum was absolutely petrified, and bless her, she never ever expressed just how concerned she was, and I do put her through some awful stress. She always knows when I'm training for a race. She never has any nails because she bites them away, but there we go. And I think she must have taken great comfort in knowing that, okay, she knows her stuff, but she's with somebody else as well, so if anything happens with either of them, they can help each other. And this is very true, and this is what we were saying at the beginning about, you know, you may all have great ideas, you may be great working independently, but actually as a little force, as a teamwork, you can achieve far greater things. One of the many beautiful photographs, not mine, I didn't take a camera with me, it was extra weight, and I just thought I'd keep these for the memories. But that is a typical picture of in the morning. And the sun coming up was such a significant thing for me, because having had a full night of hiking, to then wait, you know, as the sun started coming, it brought new energy, it brought new life, and you would be absolutely sleepwalking at times. But when that sun came up and it hit the face, and obviously immediately the temperature would raise, it was fantastic, both mentally and physically. And then it was a new day and another day on, and that little bit further into your race as well. Now, this picture is just me set up really with my pulk, and we were now between checkpoint 3 and checkpoint 4. So we're making our way to Peel River, and we're a good couple of 100 miles in now. And you can see my setup there. So my pulk's behind me, I've got my rods onto my harness, and I've got another bag just behind me, and that was my real survival stuff. So I had a lot of, those hand warmers. So even with all my pairs of gloves on, I actually needed hand warmers as well. I was absolutely obsessed and petrified of getting frostbite, and not for the reason that you might think. I wasn't afraid of getting frostbite and losing a finger, because the truth is that if it meant finishing the race and losing this little pinky, I was quite prepared to do that. Sometimes some of us can be so resilient and so determined and focused that sometimes we actually need saving from ourselves. And there's a fine line, there's a balance there between being very enthusiastic, very mentally strong, and being a little bit too much. And people like myself as athletes, we sometimes have to balance that we can sometimes take ourselves too far. So why was I paranoid about losing a little finger? Because that would have automatically DNF'd me. It would have taken me out of my race. And the medics would catch up with us once every day, once every couple of days, and they would check our fingers in the vehicle. And if there was any signs whatsoever of frostnip, which is the precursor to frostbite, that would have been me pulled out the race. And that was it. And I had no control over that. So I was paranoid about getting frostbite because it would have pulled me from the race, not because I was going to lose a finger. Thought there. So that's me with my food, and in that little bag there's probably about five or six kind of handfuls of dolly mixtures and my licorice, all sorts. Everybody was in good spirits as well. The bottom picture there is Neil and a gentleman called Matt. Neil's from actually Ireland, and Matt is one of the guys from Australia. Both of them have tried it various times. Both of them unfortunately not succeeded. And this is a picture of those two whereby, all that training, practice, all that kit and that, and unfortunately still got pulled from the race. But you can see there, they're in good spirits. And the top picture there is actually a guy called Vlad. He won the 120 race. That's him. That's that bivvy system. You can see there, he's decided not to go for the bivvy tent. He's just in his sleeping bag on a thermarest. He's got his little stove, and that's how extreme. And although that looks all very lovely and nice, you can imagine that on your own in the wilderness and dark at night. You know, that's why you practice on your own and out in your garden and off in the woods. You have got to be, you've got to have a lot of nerve, if you like. And the gentleman on the far left is Paul Watkins, and he was actually the winner. He's from Australia, and he's actually the winner, was the winner of the race as well. This is me. Okay, so we're now about day 5. Yes, so we are checkpoint 4 to checkpoint 5. Remember, the end point is checkpoint 8, and we're on the ice road. What's the ice road? Well, when we left Fort Macpherson at the 120, you then go off the Dempster Highway, and at certain periods over the winter, there's a huge big lake called the Mackenzie River, and that freezes completely. And what they do, the locals plough and cut out a road because it's quicker than going on the Dempster Highway. So the locals and us racers are allowed to use that, and it's just an ice road. And I was rather excited and looking forward. I've never walked or hiked across an ice road, well, a river, an ice river. But actually, after about several hours on this river ice road, it became rather familiar. And you know when you've just been so excited about something and then it's not quite what it is, because literally it's just a river. So it just bends to the left and to the right and to the left and to the right. And the banks are exactly the same. There's no houses. There's just very small little stubby trees because the environment is so harsh, nothing really grows. And it's just the same. Repeat after repeat after repeat. And I said to Mark, I said, I'm rather bored of this. And he went, yes, so am I. But the awful thing is we've got another 120 miles of this. And I was like, yeah, I know that. So you just have to switch off, switch out. And we weren't chatting all the time. You had to save your energy. But every now and then we'd have a little funny moment. And there were lots of scary moments as well. More about that in a bit. So that's me at night, and you can see there my hair's frozen up and I've got a bit of frosting. I had so many different buffs, but you're breathing out your hot air at the extreme of the cold, and it means that things start icing and frosting up. And the worst thing is the frosting, it goes solid around your chin. I had the most horrendous sore chin for about 4 weeks when I came back from the Arctic, because literally it had taken the skin off. Basically some sort of chemical peel. There's the ice road, and you can see that's what it looks like. It is spectacular, but if you imagine going down that for like 3 days, doing hundreds of miles, and every now and then you can get to see actually into the riverbed, so where the snow is not on the top, you can look down. It gets very dark, and you can see all the different layers, which I'm assuming that when it's freezing up, you get these different layers forming. And that there is the picture of the Mackenzie River, and we're on our way to Aklavik. Now, I said to you about the race was 9 days. So Mark and I worked it out once we'd finished the race that over a period of 9 days, we'd only managed to accumulate a total of 21 hours. Our typical training plan, my training plan, which ended up being very similar to Mark, was we would often hike for about 2.5 hours and then have anywhere between a 10 and 15 minute stop. That 10-15 minute stop was literally we'd sit on our pulk, get our legs up, eat, and we'd eat on the go as well, and get some coffee or some hot drink, check over things, make sure our systems are okay, make sure our pulk's okay, everything's tight on, because you just didn't know the weather can change like that. And if something wasn't quite right and suddenly you've got these catabolic winds that suddenly come in and they can gust up to 60-70 miles an hour with that chill with them as well, there was no stopping at that point and starting to check things out. You literally would freeze to death. So you always had to make sure that when the going was good, you kept checking your systems all the time. So this is us leaving checkpoint 5, and we were in really good spirits now because, you know, the worst of it was over. There's a place called Wright's Pass, and that was actually between checkpoint 2 and checkpoint 3. And if there's anywhere where you're going to come into real trouble, it's usually there because the winds are so horrific. It's blowing athletes off their feet, and the weather comes in. And I knew that if I got to at least checkpoint 4, I was in good mental, physical state to then be able to complete this race. And as you can see, I'm still with Mark. And yeah, you know, we're staying high and stuff. We just stopped at checkpoint 5 at Aklavik. We'd had 3 hours sleep. 3 hours sleep is immense. It's amazing when you've had 0 and you've literally been sleepwalking. But so this was good. We were good, and this was really important that we had a real good sleep, 3 hours, and we had a quick wash and just checked on our systems. We were able to bin a few things as well, so empty containers and stuff. We also had a drop bag there that we could refuel up with some things. And actually, even though we'd both practiced our systems, there was a couple of things that I realised, actually, I don't really need that, and or I do need extra of this. So that was the start of the real big stint. That's 73 miles, that really long haul. And then we knew that at the end of that, having done the big chunk, now, it'd been quite uneventful at that point. You know, the weather was quite kind to us. Yes, it had got as low as minus 35 at this point, but you know what? After a couple of days of being in the Arctic, you get used to those temperatures. You don't really notice it. That's the truth of it. But on this stint of 73 miles, it took us a couple of days. The longest we hiked for without any stop and sleep was 36 hours. We did 36 hours of continual hiking and had 2 lots of 60 minutes sleep. And yeah, that 60 minutes was amazing again, and it gave you enough to keep on. But of course, all the time you are really starting to wear your bodily systems away. Your immune system is now compromised. You know that if you cut yourself or do anything, and your reactions and actions are going to be so slower as well. Hence the reason why I blindfolded myself in my training, because everything now is against the clock. And this particular picture here shows that we turned a corner on the ice road and the weather was coming in. Might not show it really very well there, but those winds were about 50, 60 miles an hour. And Mark and I took it in turns to be behind each other to try and give each other a break. You know, like when birds fly in formation, the one that's leading is working the hardest and the one at the end, and they interchange. Or when it's cycling in a race, you change, you slipstream. And that's what we did there. Teamwork, okay? Teamwork was making Mark and my dream work. We continued, and there's a better picture there of the ice road and our pugs as well, and they do look rather big there. They're about 40 kilograms, and purposely they've got a long bar from them. It takes some getting used to. You turn a corner and it doesn't turn straight away, so very mindful of not walking too close to each other because we didn't want to take each other out. But we've both got sticks. They came in very useful, certainly in the last 3 or 4 days of the 9 days, because your ankles and your knees walking on ice take an absolute punishment. We've got little spikes that we attached and kind of rolled over and onto our trainers, onto our walking boots, and they provided a little bit of grip. But the ice, what you can't see, there's lots of like little divots and things into it, because obviously as it's forming as an ice river, it doesn't do it all smooth and in one go. So sometimes you'd be going along and next minute your pull would really pull on you and pull on your shoulders, where the wheels have suddenly got a little bit stuck into the grooves. And that was horrible, because you get into a groove and you'd lose yourself and you'd think of all sorts of things, you know, what you're going to do when you get home and how's it doing and what might it look like for people that are watching you dart, and you wonder who's watching and what's happening. And the next minute, you know, you get yanked and pulled, and it would stop you and it'd throw you out of a rhythm, and it'd be like, oh, and you'd have to start again. And actually I found I did an awful lot of rethinking of the same thing over and over again. Why? I don't know, maybe the short thing. When we did stop, like I say, every couple of hours we stopped for anywhere between 10 and 15 minutes, and I just sit down on my pulk, and all the yellow stuff stuck onto it. Was because we, although we're on an ice road, the trucks can go on there as well. And our biggest danger, other than wildlife and the element itself, goes without saying, is these trucks, these huge big trucks that take the minerals, the gases, and obviously resources to those villages right out on the Arctic Ocean. And the problem is there's no police around, so you've got to be really careful when those trucks are motoring up the highway, not onto the ice road. Sometimes they can be under the influence of alcohol, and they just said to us, you've got to be so alert and be careful, because some athletes have been almost hit and taken off, and those trucks are enormous. There's no way about it, you would never survive having been clipped by one of those, let alone hit by one. So we'd also make sure that when we stopped, we would get ourselves close in, and if we had to stop for sleep and rest, you'd have to get yourself right into the bank without going too far onto the snowbank, because if you did, then you could sink. If you sunk, it meant your foot would go down into the snow. Okay, so it's only snow, you can brush it off, but you're warm, remember, and that would mean that it could potentially melt very quickly. Wet your sock, game over. So this is coming actually into the next part, into Aklavik, or is it Inuvik, sorry, and we've been hiking all through the night, and this is when both of us suddenly realised just how exhausted we were. The hallucinations, I don't know if you've ever suffered with hallucinations, obviously they come with extreme tiredness, and the extreme tiredness, the stress, maybe when you've just had a baby or you've had something very stressful in your life, the lack of sleep, and it catches up with you. And hallucinations happen kind of in two forms. The first one is you start seeing things, and I think depending on your frame of mind, where you're at, and maybe just the way you are, you can have two forms of hallucinations. You can have those that are quite dark and scary and disturbing, and you can have those that are crazy and bonkers. Now the good thing was, Mark and I were having the crazy bonkers hallucinations. So I had Mr. Blobby from Noel's house party sat on the back of my pulk with his big goggly eyes often looking at me. I knew it wasn't there, but my God, he was even making them noises that he made. His eyes were moving. I knew it wasn't real, but trust me, he was there. Mark, on the other hand, he had something out of Sesame Street. I think it was Big Bird, actually. And he also had, who was the other guy, somebody off the radio, and he was also hitching a ride as well. And Mark would often say, will you get off? You're making it really heavy. I would giggle at that. The second part to hallucinations is you start hearing things as well. And I remember that on this particular slide, this is when I started seeing and hearing things. And again, I wasn't bothered by it, but the hearing things, it would be as if somebody would suddenly be next to me. And as we were coming in towards this checkpoint, which we knew we were going to get a lot of hours sleep, those voices was, for example, I could hear and see my grandma that passed away 12, 13 years ago. And you question yourself then. You say, I've never been in this situation. Is she there looking out for me? Is it something? Am I to believe? It's testing my faith. What's all that about? And then you'd also see and hear other people around you, and you're thinking, are they the athletes that are coming out from that checkpoint to meet you, to guide you in? Are they there? I was convinced that Kevin was there talking to me, and I'm having a full-on conversation. Now, at this point, Mark's not suffering with the hallucinations, and he said, you had a right ding-dong conversation with Kevin. I'm like, but he was there. No, he wasn't. He was actually asleep in one of the chalets. So it's amazing. So I'm so grateful at that point that Mark and I were together. How would I have dealt with it had I been on my own and having those? I'd like to think, with my desperation to finish that race, I'd have just upped my game. But who knows? Who knows? Mark and I, so next day, so at that particular checkpoint, we'd got, again, another 3 or 4 hours, and that's quite an important checkpoint. It's where the medical team give us literally a head to toe. It's the most frightening for me checkpoint. I said to you, I was paranoid about getting pulled out, and I was checked head to toe. They checked us mentally, so they were like firing math questions, arithmetic at me. I was like, I don't know arithmetic at the best of times. Don't start asking me to divide X by Y. I'm not going to give you the right answer. And just I suppose with the way I said it and what I did, they were like, yeah, you're fine. They checked every little digit on my hands and my toes, my nose, my ears, all the places you can get frostbite and that. And I was just going, please don't tell me I've got any. I do not want to get pulled from this race. And my medic, my doctor, was a guy called Scott. And he's actually all the medics are quite, and I think they've got to be, because if they've got to pull you out, you're going to be absolutely soul-destroyed. You're going to kick, scream, shout, say all sorts of things, so they've got to be very, and Scott went, you're fine, here's a herbal tea. So I had my herbal tea and I went to sleep, and Scott said, you can have my bed as well, save you getting out your sleeping bag and bivvy. So I slept in his bed, and it's the only other man's bed I've ever slept in. And so I slept in Scott's bed, had the most amazing 3.5 hours sleep, woke up, had a salami sandwich. It sounds disgusting, amazing, like salt and fat, loads of butter on it, a cup of tea, and we went back out on the road again. And there's us stretching. We were like getting up towards 300 miles now, and you can see the picture of me. I've got my ankle rolled over. My ankles were absolutely killing me. I was in absolute pain, and you're not to really take any anti-inflammatories or painkillers. With what we're putting our body through, it's not advised to start taking anti-inflammatories because the stress on your kidneys is phenomenal. Just so you know about water consumption, we have a water belt. If you runners might have a water vest. That is literally next to my skin, so it doesn't freeze. So anything and everything's going to freeze. So all your medical supplies. So I'm asthmatic. My inhalers were in like my top left bra, and my contact lenses right bra. My little gas canister for just in case was kind of in a pocket into the side of my skin. So everything that I had to make sure that didn't get frozen would always be next to my skin and under many layers. And this is where actually it's warming up a little bit. So I've not got my big down jacket on. I've just got a windbreaker and a couple of fleeces and base layer under there. And we're stretching out, and Mark is stretching out his back as well. So we decided that, we don't want to be pulled out this race because we're getting injuries, because by this stage injuries are very common. And so what we did was we said, right, every two and a bit hours that we stop to feed and eat will also include some stretches. There's Aklavik. So these boats are all frozen into the river, and that's that checkpoint that we have just left. The Arctic chalets at Aklavik, life is very basic. It's extreme up there, but it's incredibly basic as well. And you see that teepee there? That was one of the options to stay in if you didn't want the hustle and bustle, because although most athletes know that there are still people in the race, sometimes they can be a little bit loud. So when you're going in to get your sleep, and bearing in mind it could be the middle of the day or it could be in the night. This is a non-stop race. It's not you get to a checkpoint, the race stops, and then you carry on. It's an accumulated time, and it's just it's checkpoint 1 to checkpoint 8, start to finish. And Martin, the race director, said you might get better sleep, even though it'll be a hard shelter at certain checkpoints to actually go on this. I didn't go in the TP. I just wanted to be actually in a heated room, and that was good. That was a good call for me. So this picture is Dave. So I was saying to you about, we practice with our systems, and you'll notice Mark and I both have pulls. But this is Dave. Dave was from Michigan. And yes, that is a pram. A pram. A pram that you will put a baby in and you will push around. And I remember when we all met at Whitehorse and we're going through our systems and just basically reassuring the medics and the race director, because we've never met before, that we know how to work our systems. And I remember seeing Dave push out his pram. I looked at some of them thinking, oh, right, okay, that's different. And just, thinking, how's that going to work? Dave finished the race. He did a 3:83. He did finish it. And this is him just at the Arctic chalets, just checking his wheels, checking everything. All the bearings are okay, oiling things up. And actually, I got a moment, Mark and I actually did walk with Dave. We caught him up. And what he did was he had all his stuff at the front, and he would push it, give it a good push, and it would roll on its own, and he would walk freely, catch it, push it again. That was quite good. And in actual fact, it was better for him to get his feet up. He could sit in it. And at times, he did actually say, taking his stuff out, just putting it on the floor, he could actually get in it, curl up in it, and go to sleep as well. So a very ingenious idea. So initially, that whole, really? Again, he thought outside the box, but he trained with it. He trained his system and it worked. So things don't always have to be like everybody else. The reason for this picture is Didier. Didier is a French gentleman, and I actually met him for the very first time back in the Sahara. He's an incredible ultra adventure racer. He's won many races and very well experienced. I think I'm right in saying he's done 6 of the summits, of all 7 summits. He's done Everest, he's done it. And Didier was back. That was his second time for going back. And unfortunately, it was his second attempt, and his second attempt failed as well. I'm sure he will go back. He will learn from what went wrong. The reason why I say to you about Didier is there's no guarantee with this race. So even if you do train with your systems and you know your stuff and you're confident with your fitness and you can keep your mental, your mental awareness there, things can still go wrong. So there is a tiny bit of luck. And what happened with Didier is he actually pushed himself quite hard. I think he wanted the win. And he probably pushed himself a little bit too hard, and the hallucinations and the level of hallucinations and the sheer tiredness meant that he started to make a few mistakes. And with those mistakes, it was in the night, he started to wander a little bit, and he stopped. And I think he must have fallen asleep a bit too long. Anyway, he basically started to go into hypothermia. Now, with hypothermia, you actually, although it's to do with your body temperature dramatically dropping, what actually happens is you actually think that you're overheating. And Didier, like many of us athletes, realised that you cannot sweat. So he started stripping off clothes. And it's one of the reasons why we see on people that have lost their lives on, say, Everest or K2, why if they do find the bodies, they're usually got very little clothing on and or practically naked, because you do believe that you're overheating. And Didier thought that. So he started stripping clothes on. Now, for the sheer luck, and thank goodness, two other athletes were not far behind him, Dave with the pram and Paul Watkins, Patrick O'Toole, and they were not far behind him, and they could see Didier basically practically now running around in circles. He'd taken his pulk off, he wasn't attached to it, and not with many clothes on. So Dave and Patrick wrestled him to the ground. He was obviously quite aggressive and adamant. They started very slowly putting some clothes on him and getting him in a sleeping bag. You never try and quickly heat up someone who suspects suffering with hypothermia. And he was in trouble. And with hypothermia, your heart rate starts to go. So Dave decided that was it. This was the end of his race. So he pressed his SOS on his tracker. And I think it took him about half an hour. However, half an hour when you're in that situation, this is pitch black, you're out on your own, and now both Patrick and Dave started to go cold as well, because they've stopped, and this is not a scheduled stop for them, and they've stopped for too long. You can't, in the night, you can't stop for more than a couple of minutes unless you're going to bivvy down and be in all your systems. So Dave, in a little bit of a panic, realising where's the help, it's taking a while, which he can do. And they're getting in trouble as well. And now Patrick's saying he's not feeling great. So in a bit of a panic, Dave decides to light a fire, and he actually lights his stuff in his pulk. He's not going to be in the race anymore, so he starts to light it. Well, the problem is in your pulk, you've got your spare gas canister in your stove, and yes, it blew up. And the first that we knew of it is that as Mark and I are walking along the ice road coming towards Aklavik, is we see this black. It's like black on this. And bear in mind, everything is white as far as the eye can see. And we see this big patch of black on the side. And I'm looking at it, Mark's looking at it. And I'm like, pulled my buff down and went, what's that all about? It's like, I don't know. We thought no more about it. Buff goes back up. And it wasn't until we got to the chalet and we were having our checks with Scott and Johnny that they said Didier had to be pulled out because he spent a night in hospital. He was okay now, but yeah, his stuff had been blown up. But of course, that little scenario could have had far more worse consequences. You know, blowing up, it could have harmed even worse with Patrick and with Dave as well. But anyway, they're all there to relive the story, I'm sure. And both Dave and Patrick finished the race, and I'm sure Didier will be back to do that. But that face says it all. Utter disappointment, dismay. I know he's physically, mentally capable of it, but Johnny was one of the medics. He's the guy on the far left. And the gentleman that he's with there with the bald head is a guy called Pete Newland, and he's the guy on the bike. And Pete Newland is basically, he's like Ant Middleton. You know, you've got SAS, Who Dares Win. He's the guy that probably actually invented it and then told Ant Middleton and his mates actually to do it, that kind of thing. He is true ex-SAS military, you name it, he's got it. He's done Everest, he's probably swam the Atlantic, he's sailed here, there. He is ultimate extreme adventurer. And he's also actually part CEO owner of the Rangers Trust, which is preservation of the rhinos, elephants. They train the rangers to protect those animals against the poachers. And he has done the race itself, the 6633, but not content with just doing it by pulling his own pulk and sled. He then decided to go back the following year, the year that I was there, and cycle it on a fat bike. And I believe that when we are allowed to, that he would like in summer to actually canoe it all from Whitehorse and along the Mackenzie River and all the way to the Arctic Ocean, and I'm sure he will do. So he was on the journey as well, and I had the pleasure of meeting him. He's a very well respected man and has some connections as well. And there's Johnny, the medic. So we're getting towards the end of the race, and there's me. I've got every single layer on there. That night it would drop to about -45, and I did know then it was -45. It's just bonkers cold. You might be able to see there how red I am here. I'd unfortunately not always got my buff in the right place and under my eyelashes, and yeah, it had proper like a chemical peel, and it was so painful, and it almost threatened to pull me out actually, because I'd got such bad chill burn, but they did turn around and say, look, you just slather it on, you've got maybe a day and a bit to go, just make sure you keep it protected, and you're going to have horrendous facial peel. And I did. Literally my face fell off for about a week after I got back, but that's me in the dark, and you know that picture looks like I'm all together. I'm there putting my glove on, I'm adjusting the strap with my pole, and you can see a lot of frosting around there because that's my breath coming out and the heat from me freezing up. But I can tell you now that I have no recollection of that picture being taken, and apparently it's out of the car window. I was on a different planet at that point. The hallucinations, the sheer tiredness, and all I kept saying to myself was, I've got to get to checkpoint 7 and then checkpoint 8, and this hell will be over, basically. It was a means to an end by this point. So for a lot of the days eventually of this race, I can't really remember much. It's simple as that. And then this is the last checkpoint before the very end, and I think that picture on the left probably says it all really. Yeah, head in the hands. What am I doing? Why? Questioning everything. I knew I had it then, unless something drastically went wrong. But I was questioning myself of what was my real means of putting myself in this situation? What am I learning from it? What am I going to learn from it? And all these questions go round, and this probably did entertain me for probably about 48, 72 hours really. But that was a shot that Veronica got, and yeah, that pretty much sums it up. And then on the right is us in one of those trailers, absolutely bolted. You can see the ice on the floor, and there's ice on the inside as well. And although we're sat there in a trailer, I've got all my mittens on, and I'm eating a dried food. And that one particular packet of dry food probably had about 1,000 calories in it, and I'd eat about 2 of those at the same time. Mark's obviously a bit hardier than me. He hasn't got his gloves on, but he's changed his feet into some like soft bug boot things, which that would be my suggestion. Definitely have something different. Oh, the end is in sight. The sun is coming up. We've got 55 miles to go to get to Tuktoyaktuk. And oh my goodness, now most of it has been flat. So from checkpoint 1 to checkpoint 3 at Fort McPherson, it was quite undulating. And then most of it, well, on the Mackenzie River, of course, it's flat as a pancake. It's a river, nice river. But then when we left checkpoint 7 to get to the very last one, checkpoint 8 at the finish, we didn't realise how undulating it was. And by then I was actually physically exhausted as well, to suddenly start pulling that pulk. So although it didn't feel very heavy on the wheels, I'm so glad I actually did do my tyre dragging, because whilst it wasn't advised by Martin, I went against his advice. So there's a little tip as well. Sometimes you've got to just go with your gut feeling. My gut feeling was I would need to do some tyre dragging, even though Martin said it wasn't crucial. And I'm glad I went with my gut feeling, because it came really well. Going up and down even the smallest of hills at that point now, with about 55 miles to go, I felt like I was dragging a tank behind me. And to get to the Arctic Ocean. And that's your finish line. That is your finish line. You get there and you can see the sun is just coming up again. That last part. Your finish point is that sign, and there really is a sign there saying the Arctic Ocean, and that's in Tuktoyaktuk. And that last little stage there was probably the biggest that I remember, because although I was all over the place and sleepwalking and stuff, I remember Martin, the race director, coming up to Mark and I and saying, right, so 10 o'clock tomorrow morning is really when the race finishes. don't get me wrong, if we'd have been probably an hour, 2 hours after that, he wouldn't have DNF'd us out of the race. He wouldn't do that. But he's basically saying, look, you're on course for this. Just get a move on, get to the end, and then we can all start shipping you back to Eagles Plain, because it's obviously a 380-mile journey. Stay at Eagles Plain, and then you make your way back to Whitehorse. So it's a long old trek. Now, it was at the time of the Six Nations rugby tournament, and Martin is a very big Welsh supporter, and that year Wales did win it, and it was the final. And I remember Martin pulling up with Johnny, the medic, next to him, and I think there was 2 people in the back just to come and give us all well wishes at the last 40 miles that we had to go. And Martin said, look, you guys, so because of the time difference, you need to either get a move on and come in the next 4 or 5 hours, or just leave it to the last minute, because I really don't want you coming in when it's the rugby will, you know, the final on the thing. And I just kind of, well, I didn't lose it while he was there. So the window wound up, they zoomed off back to Tuktoyaktuk. I let rip, and lots of expletives came out of my mouth. Mark just stood there and thought, oh my God, I don't think I've ever seen a woman kick off so much. I was slamming me walking pole. Who does he think he is? What we've been through, what we've done, and now he's telling us that we can only come in at a certain time because he wants to watch a blooming rugby final. I absolutely loved it. But you know what? That energy that I found to absolutely kick off in my own little environment, in the middle of nowhere, obviously nothing around, was what I needed, that adrenaline, endorphin boost. And we'd suddenly averaged about 3 miles by this stage an hour. And suddenly on your tracker, everybody apparently is going, oh my God, they're up to about 6 miles an hour now. What's going on? And we absolutely zoomed it. And that was because I was like, right, I'm going to make sure I come right slap bang on that. We didn't, you know, we as it worked out, we got there for, well, as you can see, the sun's coming up. So that's about 4 in the morning. And I think UK time, it was about lunchtime that we got in. And therefore, there we go. And that's the key. That's the finish line. Not lots of people, if any of you have done any road racing or big races, there's not hundreds of people there clapping. It's just one sign, and you get to touch that sign. And that for me was just, I didn't cry. Everybody said, did you cry with emotion? Oh no, Mark and I shed tears throughout the whole race. Mark had an episode of horrendous stomach upset. We really did think he was going to have to finish his race. We used every possible item we could out of both our pulls for his toilet trips. And trust me, going to the toilet when you're in that environment it's a procedure because of the cold and what you've got to do. So to have an upset stomach, we really did think he was going to have to end it, and we did everything to keep him in that race. And he's such a trooper. He was adamant that, you know, his toe just was not going to end his race, and we got there, and he was physically exhausted to that point, and I was just done. So no, there were no emotions or anything actually when we crossed the finish line, because it was just sheer elation of just, oh, it's done. And then, believe it or not, we're bundled into 2 cars as we are, and we set that. That's it. No glory or anything. That's us literally. So we're there at the finish. We've got smiles on our face. I can't actually remember that picture at all. Not at all. In the background is the village of Tuktoyaktuk. It's the most northerly village in the world. And that on the right is us in the school. There is a school in Tuktoyaktuk. And the thing that I remember about that school is we're still in our kit. We're given a pot of porridge. But on the wall, was all these kind of like little lanyards with little things, and each child has a lanyard, and on it is a little alarm. And I was like, what are those for the kids? And Martin says, well, when they go and play outside at playtime, if they see a polar bear, obviously when they come out of hibernation, they press that and it sets off an alarm, and then all the kids are brought inside. I was like, right, you know, we just think about our children, it starts spitting with rain and they're all back inside doing the busy books. No, the children in the Arctic, when they see a polar bear on the horizon, that's when they're brought inside. And that's my memory of that. So there we go. And on this one here, that's my face being treated with a steroid cream. Not a pretty look. That wasn't a pretty look. Oh God, it was on fire. You could literally feel the heat. And there's me with my medal, and there we go. That's what it is. So it's that is known as an annuity, and it's like a sculpture, and you often see a lot of them that have been formed for whatever reason. There's religious thoughts to it, just geological thoughts, but they kind of form on top of the ice out in the Arctic. And it goes on a little platform, and I'm particularly proud of that one. And that's us back at Whitehorse in the hotel. And we had a presentation evening. Not everybody was there. Those that finished the 120 often would go back home early to get back to family, and or those that unfortunately didn't make it and were drawn out of the race early on were also pulled out and made their way home as well. So what can I say? 7 skills to building resilience. You know, here's a picture of Mark and I, and Mark's attending to his pulp, and I'm checking he's okay, and he'll check on me, we'll check our systems, and there we are, fist pumping, you know, and it's like, we've got this, you know, we're bedraggled, we could be in somewhere better place, but teamwork is making that dream work, and we're going to stick through this all together. 7 skills to build resilience. Well, for me on this particular race, I remained calm. There was an episode whereby we were in a storm, and we got caught out in it, and we decided to bed down into our bivvy. And after 40 minutes, my body temperature was just dropped way too low. And I woke up not knowing whether I was still delirious, hallucinating, but I remember not feeling my fingers. And in a bit of a panic, I started to kind of like do some snow angels in my sleeping bag in my bivvy. And I warmed up, not still quite feeling my fingers, but I went back to sleep because there was no way 40 minutes was going to be long enough for the next 20 odd hours of hiking. And I could hear Mark snoring as well, so he wasn't going to wake up. I went back to sleep, and I must have woken up literally within minutes, and I couldn't feel my fingers again. And I was starting to panic then. So I remember in one of the training sessions that we'd been told, actually it was by Pete, the ex-SAS man, that if you think you've got frostbite in your fingers, or you can't feel it because they've lost circulation, there's only one thing for it, and the survival is you have to stick your fingers up your bottom. It's the warmest possible place. So I can't believe I'm doing this, but you know what, I don't want to get pulled out of the race, and right now I'm feeling a little bit scared that no matter what I do, where I put my hands, armpits, legs, everything, I couldn't feel my fingers. So I started to put my fingers up my bottom. You know what? It actually works. It really does work. And so within minutes, I had my fingers back, but there was no way I was getting actually my core temperature warm. So I actually kind of screamed out and going, Mark, I can't stop any longer. And he said, you know what? He says, I'm in and out. I can't get warm. And it's just because it was just too cold. So we then decided to pack up, and we packed up within minutes, and we were back on the road, and we were almost running to try and bring up a body temperature. And for me, whilst I was panicking and rather upset to think I could have screwed my race up, finishing that race then, I did actually stay calm, and I remembered about, you know, the bottom and the fingers trick and stuff. And so by remaining calm in what was quite a scary situation, overcome it, and went on to finish it. I used my body as a feedback as well, you know, stretching my ankles before they became sore. They first came sore, and then I thought, no, I need to do this on a regular basis. So I stretched my ankles out before they became too sore, and therefore would have become an injury. And every time something happens, I accepted it. I embraced these opportunities, just thinking, okay, this is challenging me, but did I really think this was going to be a simple walk from A to B? No, it wasn't. So sometimes you just got to accept what is, and it's about that ability to adapt to whatever is thrown at you. Nourish yourself. You know, I spent 6 months researching my food, and I researched it by chucking it all in the freezer and working out what froze, what didn't, what tasted nice, what changed, what, you know, lots of different things. Chocolate is chocolate. Crackers, salted crackers, things like that are still salted crackers when they come out of the freezer. Angel Delight and yogurt is delicious when it comes out of the freezer. And of course, it's all stored in your pulp, so it will be frozen. So, you know, that research and nourishing myself, decided to treat myself to a few things that I wouldn't normally do, like the Reese's peanut butter cups and stuff like that. Really nice, and for a moment it was like, this is really lovely and nice and tasty. Build positive social relationships. Like I said, I'd never met Mark before. never be prior to this race, but the time we had on that journey from Eagles Plain and in that room where you saw us fist bump all the way to the end, to the Arctic Ocean, we've obviously created a bond. We're not in contact with each other all the time, every time, but we have a unique experience there. And so I'll never forget Mark. And that's something very unique. So build positive relationships between each other, because you never know when and why you will need each other, and we certainly did need each other. Find your purpose in life. Gosh, that's quite a relevant one, isn't it? Especially now. I found mine. And I don't necessarily think I need to do any more ultra races now to find about me. I've discovered a lot about myself, that's for sure. If something upsets me, like I did with Martin, saying we've got to get in by a certain time, I will show it and do it. But I have learnt a lot. And you don't need to take on an ultra adventure to find out about you. Crikey, we're going through a time right now that you are, I hope, learning some things about you that you can turn into a positivity. And actually, even if it's seen as a negative thought or something that's generally negative or not positive, that there will be a way and a means, I'm sure, that you can flip that into actually it becoming eventually something that's constructive and that is purposeful. I'm now a bit of a role model in society, so I was only obviously just being sought out when I was found doing my tyre dragging, but from then on now, I do have quite a few followers, and I'm seen, and people ask me, and it gave me opportunities like this to speak to wonderful people like yourself. I've done a lot of presentations in schools, to like the D of E, award ceremonies and that, and just even if I just inspire one person, and or try and express to people how in times of such adversity, so stressful times and that we still can take some huge amounts of positivity and things of purpose to that. And the last thing really is practice your skills. I practiced with all my kit. I made sure that I knew it inside out. And the same can be said with your skill set as well. If you already have those skills, you might take them for granted or become complacent, but you need to make sure that you still continue to see them with importance and that they can be very useful to others as well, because I can assure you at some point or the other they will be incredibly useful. Nine ways to build a resilience at your work. Well, I think, you cherish your social support and interaction. Good relationships as well with family and friends and others are vital. And being active in your wider community also helps as well. Certainly does with my role now as a personal trainer. My business has flourished since doing these adventure ultras. And yes, it ticked that one, it definitely ticked that box of me wanting to prove myself to myself and to those outside, that I was professionally worthy of calling myself a medical exercise PT, and that I know my stuff, and that I am actually a runner and can run. Treat problems as a learning process. Develop the habit of using challenges like now as opportunities to acquire master skills and build on that achievement as well. Avoid making a drama out of a crisis. Stress is obviously a part of your life, and it can change many aspects. But how we interpret and respond to events such as now, I think, has a big impact on how stressful we can generally find them. So there are people that are coping with this situation far better than others. And whilst it's not a competition of who deals what and how deals, everybody has their tools in their kit bag to deal with this. People have said to me, how are you dealing with this, Hayley? And the truth is, I'm dealing with this well, because I have obviously put myself in situations that I feel are more effective to my life or detrimental to me. And I know as long as I keep within the rules, i.e. we're to stay outside of that, then my chances are very slim. Yes, it affects us with our business. I'm not doing PT as such at my gym, but I've found a way to remodel my business, and I'm doing a lot of one-to-one PT now this way, and I've got opportunities such as doing presentations as well. So although I might not be able to do what I would normally do, I found a way of gearing up and changing, and that's it. That's how I did it in the Sahara, in the Arctic. Something would come our way, it wouldn't lend itself well, or how I would anticipate to receive it, but I'd change it into a positive and make it work for me. Celebrate your successes. I don't think people do this enough, because when people do celebrate success, and also if we're seen as maybe showing off or saying something, but you know what, there's nothing actually wrong with that, and it's not showing off, it's not trying to pick yourself up against other people, because in actual fact, when you celebrate your success and you talk about it, you don't realise how many people you inspire as well. So take the time at the end of each day to review what went well, and congratulate yourself. So each day at the moment while we're in isolation in this situation, congratulate yourself. You know, we're homeschooling, aren't we? And that's really hard. We're trying to balance, and we're still working. You know, people make out that we're at home and we're just baking all the time, homeschooling. No, we're balancing life as well. And I don't know about you, but it's like being in a goldfish bowl. It's everything that we've done with the ability to share and share out. But now we're in this goldfish bowl and everything's so much more intense. So you definitely need to give yourself a good pat on the back. This trains the mind as well to look for success rather than dwelling on negativity and failure. And you know what? There's a lot of social media and things like that I draw myself away from. There's a lot of Facebook comments of obviously a lot of negativity and things. I don't feel the need to read that. I really don't. And if you're finding the news or certain streams of social media platforms negative, you're not wrong to turn away from it and don't. You know, just because one person is dealing with something that way doesn't mean to say that it should influence you to do. Develop realistic life goals for guidance and a sense of purpose. So do something each day to move you towards them. You know, so if you've got, I don't know, it could be a project in the house or something you've got to do now on a presentation, or something you've got to get ready for when you are back in work in your office, or something to do with homeschooling. But do something each day to move you towards, you know, ticking that box and succeeding at that. Small is beautiful, and it's one step at a time, a baby step at each one. And you know what? In this mad, chaotic world right now, little baby steps are absolutely perfect. You know, you're doing a great job. You really are. Take positive action. Do something in the face of adversity. A sense of control, even if it doesn't actually initially remove the difficulty, the source of that. And nurture a positive view of yourself. Develop confidence in your ability to solve problems and trusting your instincts. You know, it's about your gut instincts. Although Mark said don't need to drag a tyre, my gut instinct said something different, and I did it. And you know, your instincts will also help you build resilience. Keep a realistic perspective. Place challenges or painful events in the broader context of lifelong personal development. I do hope and truly believe that from the situation of COVID-19, I think we will be far more resilient after this. It's got to have a positive effect. Practice optimism, something I'm doing a lot with my clients at the moment, and just generally out speaking to you. Like I've just said, I think good will come of this. But if you practice optimism, you know, that glass half full, nothing is either wholly good or bad. And if we allow our thinking to dictate how we view something, it will take over and make your thinking work for your benefit, rather than letting doubts creep in and cloud your judgment. And then that's me jumping for joy. These are the only ways to strengthen resilience at work, but personal journals are a great idea. I know many of the teachers of schools have encouraged the kids to do personal journals in this time. Some of you may well have faith. That's great. You know, I'm not a truly overly faithful person, but there were times that I did think, oh, come on, please help. Practicing mindfulness and or meditation helps you to connect with yourself as well, and that really is, I think, an essential thing. At the end of each night or each morning, have some you time. Take yourself off to a completely separate room, even if it's just to sit in your car. You know, there's been times when I feel too much in this goldfish bowl, particularly when we weren't even allowed to have more than an hour outside. I just go and sit in my car on the drive, and that's me time. And identify what works for you, and you stick with them. Even if somebody says, no, that's useless, so it's wrong, then nothing is wrong. You stick with what you know, make them grow for you. And if down the line it stops working, then branch off to another path. Again, no right or wrong. very much. There's my hubby, my son, who is now 10, will be 11 on the 1st of June, and there is me. There is me. Okay, thank you very much. I can see Nick has popped up again. That must be me.
Hello.
Hi.
Thank you so much. A for helping with the technical issues at the beginning, but B for keeping going for that long. Thank you.
Oh, I can talk.
Yes, but it's a very interesting story. That's why we've had lots of chat and we've got so many questions. Can I ask you some questions? That I'd like to invite more. If there's anybody that'd like to ask questions on the chat or the Q&A, please do so. So, I mean, we've got comments here about wow and fantastic relating to you, but also this comment, which is fantastic to see a pint-sized, petite, asthmatic female compete and complete this race when so many big, strong blokes have failed. You give this lady the chills and you're a reminder that anything is possible with robust planning and a very strong mind.
Yes, mindset, it's all up there. You can be as fit as anything, like I said about Didier. Didier is an extraordinarily fit man. You know, he's, like I say, done all the mountains in the world, climbed all the ones in the Himalayas. But, you know, he possibly pushed himself a bit too far. The doubts came into there, and that was the end of his race. And we were told by the race directors that, yes, you've got to be physically fit and know your systems, but it's all about mindset as well. And I believe that the people that will get through this COVID and see the positivity afterwards, and that will be those that, you know, take things from this and, you know, build on the resilience. But it's all about mental strength. It really is.
Okay, another one. Was it about the stones? Did you place them?
I did. I most certainly did. I had those stones. I did, and I had them in my pocket. And as soon as we got to the Arctic Ocean, although I was delirious and not aware, Mark actually did turn around as he bundled back and he went, "The stones!" And I was like, "Oh God, yeah, I can't do this again." So I actually, where you saw that Arctic Ocean sign, there was a bit of a drop, and I just stepped down off that, and I gave it my best hurl shot, and I threw all three, and they're somewhere now. And obviously that part of the Arctic Ocean will have melted and it will be refrozen again, but they'll be somewhere now on the bottom of the Arctic Ocean. Yes.
Another one is, did you feel that by doing it as a team, i.e. you and Mark, etc., that you had a better chance of completing it?
Yes. So the answer is that is yes and no, because there have been other people that have not necessarily buddied up, but have had a longer time together, and they've not been successful. So the year last March when we did it, there was two other like couples, as it were, two guys and two other guys, and they didn't finish it neither. So I do truly believe it does help you, because there would have been moments when I would have been rather scared. You know how I was saying about sometimes people like myself walk a very fine line between you know, we have to be sometimes safe from ourselves. That's why I would never do Everest or anything like that, because I think my desire to get to the top and get back down, no matter what the consequences, I probably would do something rather silly. And so I think, knowing myself and other things that I've done since then, my determination, I probably would have still done it actually. Unless it would have been a medical reason, I probably still, even without Mark, and he would have done too as well. He's ex-military. Succeeded, yeah. But I'm not going back out there to try it again. It's a once and once only. Oh gosh, yeah, never again.
Yeah, I think that's the end of our questions. All that really needs to be said at the end is thank you so much. Congratulations for being the only GB female to do the 383. Wow, wow, wow. And thank you for sharing your story with Wish. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you very much for joining. And if you've got any other questions of that, I'm more than happy to answer them via email or whatever.
And people can if people want to get in touch with you, they can contact me via Twitter
Absolutely.
or Facebook or LinkedIn, and I can answer any questions.
About anything, that's fine.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much. Thanks, bye.